tourism. Now, I've been warned by my fellow board chairs yesterday that I should cut down my my time and use it wisely. So look, I'll also just take the opportunity to thank Council for the extension of the 2020 annual plan period. Thank you for that. And at that note, I'll leave it to there. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate your brevity, sir, already being over time as you were at that point, but thank you. Just before we go to questions, just one from me. When you're talking about your shovel-ready projects, an early front runner for Word of the Year, and whether it's transport or the conservation work more generally, are you suggesting that these are things that we should seek funding to make happen in the short term, or are they things that we should add to the list of work that council can do, albeit deferred for a year or more to meet your other submission points around next year's proposed rates increase?
Look, I'm open to suggestions on that, to be honest. And I understand it is a difficult thing to ask for a zero rates increase and then turn around and say, shit, we could do with some, we could do with new toilets and we'd like the roads fixed at the same time. Look, I think there is some shuffling to do around budgets and where finances come from that. But I also think too that the council, one of the things, you guys are going to need some time to think some of this stuff through. And that's what I'm suggesting. I'm not, so I'm open to suggestions on that. You got to remember, I wrote the second part of this submission with the board in the middle of lockdown 4, and it's a completely different kind of world. The sun is still shining, and the birds are still coming out. So maybe it's not all total doom and gloom, but I guess we also have to look at some of the terrible statistics that are coming out of Treasury and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you to you and all boards for managing in this difficult environment in terms of putting your submissions together. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Worship. Kia ora, Paul. I just have a question about the tourism research, and I was wondering what you think that might focus on.
Look, I think we want to, given what I've seen from Malcolm and the team just over the last few weeks, I really want to see us focus more on that. And I was really delighted to see yesterday the marketing campaign around local and regional tourism. But I think we do need to look at just what the spend on that is, more about how that actually is undertaken by New Zealanders. One of the critical areas for me is also the environmental impacts of tourism on the Otago Peninsula as well, and whether or not there are means or ways that the community and agencies should be actually adding value to the restoration side of it and the mitigation of that.
So you're aware of the work, tourism obviously has effects on employment and it has effects on businesses there, but also a lot of the tourism ventures restore heritage buildings or have proactive things like Blue Penguins Pukakura on the environment. I also wonder, yesterday someone brought up about research on, or was it the day before, research on cruise ships and their impact on the environment. Do you think that has an impact on the peninsula environment as well?
I'm wondering whether there's enough information about what financial impact cruise ships provide to the Otago Peninsula, and whether or not we need to change our strategies around how we deal with cruise ships to make and mine that opportunity better. The other, of course, is the potential for environmental impacts of cruise ships from invading species, that kind of stuff as well. So some of that's dealt with in biodiversity, but some of it I'd certainly like to see more of that from there, because it is a big part of the harbour, and the harbour is critical to the peninsula and to the city.
So when you talk about the destination plan, do you think that part of that research would inform a reinvigorated destination plan?
I would hope so. Look, I think everything's on the table at the moment, and I think everything should be on the table. We need to continue to think and work together proactively to make the best of things and see how it goes. And if it means a better destination plan or changing our economic strategy, fine. You know, there's been some good work done by staff, but you know, we just got to keep at it, and I think that's the critical part to it. And the more information, the more learning we have from that, the better off we'll be, and better hopefully that our businesses will continue to grow, and will grow this year at least.
Thank you.
And lastly, Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Pope, I wondered if you could give us any sense that you have of how nimble, probably is the best word, tourism operators are, or how well prepared they are to adapt their businesses to an increased domestic visitor sector.
There are talk from some people about reducing costing, to make it more accessible to a regional tourism, and there's also discussions around packaging some of the attractions that they have and accommodation to that as well. I can't necessarily speak for businesses directly about their nimbleness, but I would say that all businesses at the moment are looking at the flexibility that they have in the market and the way that they do business to try and make something happen for them over the next few months. And I think really the situation that we're in at the moment necessitates that, as I say, that flexibility. And I think people will come to that. I think what we might see is more and more people joining forces, looking at other different types of events, different types of activities. And certainly what I'm seeing from and hearing from tourist operators, large and small, is that they are looking at ways to leverage those things for themselves and for their businesses. So, you know, like I say, it is at the moment, it's doom and gloom. It looks pretty tough. Some people are saying they'll make 10% of their normal revenue this year, 30% next year. That's pretty dire. But there is still some thoughts around, you know, how to leverage things such as the cycleway, that kind of stuff, how to look at you know, joining packaging things together. So yeah, I guess
that, yeah, thank you for that. I guess that leads on to my next question, the final question, which is around if the extended part of the Peninsula Connection, the Otago Harrington Point section, if that's accepted by the government in the application as a shovel-ready project, and we get that completed sooner rather than later, how do you see that as being an important element in attracting the domestic tourism market here?
I think it's critical, and I think also, and I would say too, that NZTA's work with State Highway 88 is critical to that, as far as the whole harbour connection. And I think from the basis of regional tourism, it provides a really great opportunity. The second thing I think, and this is I'm hearing from one or two operators about harbour linkages, connecting Port Chalmers with Portobello, connecting cycleway walkways, but also repackaging things around accommodation. So instead of that just being a day trip, maybe looking at doing that as an overnight trip, staying in Portobello, going having a meal in the pub, and then taking on the next stage of it, linking up with public transport with the regional council, that kind of thing. So yeah, there is definitely opportunities that comes out of it. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much.
No worries.
Thank you, and thank you, Paul, for your submission and your patience this morning. I appreciate it.
No, thanks, guys. Have a good day. Enjoy.
Francisca Griffin from the West Harbour Community Board.
Your Worship, I just wanted to interject at this point and say I'll be sitting back from this.
Thank you. Apparently the meeting is also live streaming now here, so you can go back to however it was that you were conducting yourselves earlier, or maybe not in some cases. Ms. Griffin, welcome. You're on mute, friend.
Yeah, I thought someone
The next 5 minutes are yours.
Here I am. This is weird. Thank you all very much. I want to say first to council and staff for all your amazing work in this incredibly weird time that we are living in. You will have read my submission on behalf of my board. We weren't able to have a meeting in March. It was due on the 18th, and we decided not to hold it. And so our submission is basically the same as what I presented to you all at the end of January. So I'll just have a wee look at it here. Thank you. The continued Sycamore hoo-ha is fantastic. Thank you very much. Good to keep that going. I know I live in Port Chalmers, and our hillsides are starting to look pretty amazing. There's lots of little native trees regenerating themselves. So yeah, and lots of birds, of course, coming out of Otago. We need toilets. Everybody said they need toilets, I bet. Don't need to kind of know that to know that. The cycleway really needs one. That once that gets finished, there really needs to be one. There needs to be one there now. I've heard some semi-horror stories of what people have done along that track. So that'd be great. Also, the people of Putakau, they would also like, well, some of them apparently would really like a permanent toilet down there. They have taken it upon themselves to put a portaloo in there the last few years at Christmas and Easter. And of course, the other thing that I spoke to in January was the potential upgrade of the main street here in Port Chalmers. I just wanted to signal that. I know that we're all, of course, living in very weird times right now, and that may not be possible, but just in case it is, we want to keep it on the radar. And if we do if we get signaled that it may happen, what we'll do is take it out to the community to see what they want, and see if well, you know, to see for starters if they actually want it, or if there's something else they want, and if they do want an upgrade to the main street, how it should proceed. Yeah, I think that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're happy to take questions?
Absolutely.
I have one. Has the board had any correspondence from NZTA around their speed limit review for the stretch of George Street in Port Chalmers?
No, we have not, and thank you for that. I will email probably Peter Brown and find out what is going on about that. Good call there, Mayor Hawkins. Thank you very much.
And have we got, sorry, Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I absolutely agree. I've been lobbied as well from people who are wanting, someone's showing their phone number there, what's that? For people who are wanting the toilets at the beginning of the track. And I know it's been quite a major issue there. Do you know where that is at with planning or anything? Do you know where we're at with that, Francine? Or?
It's Francisca, Carmen.
Francisca, thank
yes,
you.
Thank you. I'm assuming that it's top of the list. I haven't actually spoken with anybody, but yep, my optimism puts it at the top of the list.
And the at St. Leonard's, where you walk through to that, you know, across that road where it was 80, at the moment it's 50. Is that temporary? The 50 just while the work is on, or are we going to look at getting that made permanent? Just
that's an that's an NZTA issue. So I can ask at the same time about that. I'm in contact with Jason, who he is very good at communicating what is going on there. So I can find that out for you.
Oh, I'm just wondering if the community board is lobbying for that.
Of course, and part of the plan, there is to be one of those little chicane things in the middle of the road where people can go halfway across, and not a chicane, but you know what I mean, like a
yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah, so that people can get safely halfway across and then safely halfway across.
Yes, because I know quite a few residents have raised it with me as well. Can I ask, has the community board had any contact with any of the local businesses there? Because I know some people have tried to contact them yesterday. I know I did myself, and it looks like some of them might have closed down. Have they? Do you know how they're going? Obviously times are tough, but what have you got any idea what's happening there?
I don't think anybody's closed. I think they're just closed right now, but I don't think anybody is going to stop. Not as far as I'm aware.
Okay, so you haven't heard of any closing?
Nope.
Lovely, that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It has been a while since we've seen signs of life at Carol Meikle's shop, however.
Well, that's an exception. Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Worship. Kia ora, Francisca. Just wanting to chat about ask about cruise ships. Obviously, they won't be coming back for quite a while. There's talk about the pros and cons that it has on the local community, and there's been talk about perhaps doing some research on cruise ships emissions. I wondered what how the community feels about the cruise ships coming and about the pros and cons.
Okay, well, I think just like with the toilet at Putakau Nui, it will be well divided, and there'll be some people in the middle. Yeah. I know that collectively working on the emissions out of those ships is something that really has to happen. I also know that there are people that love the street being full of people. There are people that hate it. I think this is just my personal view, is that it would be good to do some research and have a look at it. Of course, cruise ships are important to tourism in Dunedin and New Zealand in general, but maybe, and once again, this is my personal view, that it could be looked at to see if we can do this a better way for not just Dunedin and New Zealand, but the planet that we inhabit.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Bishop. Thanks, Francisca. I just got 2 points to make more than a question, and that is you obviously recognise that you have asked for increased capital spends, and I notice you haven't asked for a rates freeze. But my comment really is around the speed limit review. When you are asking NZTA, can you also include the DCC Transport Department as well in those requests? Because we can pursue your requests through the Regional Transport Committee, and in fact, there already has been a letter sent from the Regional Transport Committee to the head office in NZTA demanding that they move forward with that speed limit review. So we'll be more than happy again to follow up to ask why, given that it was promised to be done by December, that it hasn't happened. And so,
sure.
Okay,
well, if I don't, fingers crossed I hear back from Peter pretty much immediately. I mean, we're all at home right now, aren't we? So
I'll send you Janine Benson's email. She's the head of transport in the DCC, and have you CC her in as well.
Oh, that'd be great, because I want to talk to her about something else anyway.
Okay,
thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for, Councillor Elder.
Hi, Francisca. Good to hear from you, and good to hear about those native trees going instead of sycamores. I'm just querying about the public toilets, and across a number of boards, people are asking for this, and in particular related to sort of asset that is also about tourism, local tourism and domestic tourism, and that is on cycleways. So I was just wondering, do you believe that it would help to have the Tourism Infrastructure Fund for building toilets around assets that would enable more tourists to use your cycleway or beaches, etc.?
Absolutely. I don't care where the money comes from, as long as the toilets appear.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Francisca. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your submission. Mr. Morrison.
I'll be sitting back, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Once you found the mute button, Alistair, the next 5 minutes are all yours. You're on mute, Alistair.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, all good. Go for it.
Right. Hello, good morning, and thanks for the opportunity to join you for 5 minutes, which is not a lot of time, so I'll get started. Our submission to the annual plan stretched to 4.5 pages, but I don't intend to read them all. I'll just highlight some points. But first, I'd just like to repeat our thanks to the City Council essential staff for keeping the place operational during these difficult times.
Yeah.
In your green Have Your Say booklet, you asked for comment on bus and rail services. We support cheaper bus fares, perhaps at least partly funded from parking revenue. And we like the concept of free bus loops in the city. And we could see the benefit of such a loop tying in with commuter train services. And that would obviously be part of a much bigger discussion. We've made a detailed submission to the Otago Regional Council requesting a much needed improvement to the current very limited bus services from Dunedin City northwards. And we would ask for your support in any upcoming discussions you will have with them. We've made a comment on domestic tourism, and I would like to invite a representative from Enterprise Dunedin to come for a drive with me to our part of the world with a view to getting their support in promoting the North Coast area as a viable destination for visitors. I like the term shovel ready, and I recognise that government funding has been sought for big ticket items, but there is a lot of shovel ready work which could get started in our area, much of it to do with safety issues on some of our roads, and I have itemised some of those in our submission. There is one shovel-ready job I would like you to consider that not only relates to safety, but also to saving the council some money. It's my understanding that Shortcut Road has been among the most expensive unsealed roads to maintain in the whole network. Seal extensions for unsealed roads used to be a perennial item at annual plan time, mostly to reduce dust nuisance, but that item got canned some years ago. I would like you to look at the concept of fully sealing Shortcut Road as a safety item, as well as reducing ongoing maintenance costs. I believe that the job could be carried out for well under $500,000, and it is shovel ready. I've made some comment on your waste minimisation and management plan, although I feel that the 138 pages of documentation constitute a discussion rather than a plan. And I recognise that much of this discussion will happen later in the year. And I've suggested that a simple means of communicating with the community might be the way to go. I've reiterated our plea to get the Waikouiti landfill capping carried out during this calendar year. It is long overdue and it is very much shovel ready. Once completed, we would then like increased support for the local One Coast team of volunteers to make some real progress on the recycling project. I've made comment on the concept of a cycleway between Oamaru and Dunedin, approximately 25% of which would pass through our community board area. And this is something that's been discussed in our area for many years and has been highlighted in previous community plans. We would very much like to see the content of the recent feasibility study, which was part funded by DCC. And I recognise that there are sometimes commercial or private land issues associated with such plans, but we really need to see the guts of the study to get the project out of the discussion phase. Tomorrow you'll be hearing from Sarah Knightis about the concept of forming a Trails Trust or trusts. This concept is something that we would support, and it might well tie in nicely with a previously mooted concept of a trust for our particular cycleway. And I believe that now is the time, with possible government support, to actually get this thing moving. And lastly, a comment about rates and capital projects. We believe that the waterfront or steamer basin development project should be put on hold, along with the architectural bridge concept. And we understand that there are aging pipes and some old electrical infrastructure underneath George Street that require replacement, but it is likely that they could be deferred for at least a year. We would suggest that any design expenditure on the one-way concept for George Street should be put on hold. And as a priority, and with respect, I feel that you should listen to the views of the George Street and other retailers who can surely be considered as experts in their field when it comes to attracting commercial activity back to the centre city. I understand that council staff have been asked to review possible budget variations with a view to perhaps reducing or eliminating the proposed 6.5% rates increase. This is something that we would support. So thanks for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Councillor Lord.
Yeah, I just I note what you're saying about the George Street people being experts in their field, and I have no doubt that they are, but I'm just wondering how tolerant they would be if we did defer this project for another year, and then and I'll just let you know that there's no work predicted to start until the very end of this calendar year anyway. It's next year before it starts. But how do you think they'd feel if we didn't replace this? How would we look if we deferred maintenance?
Well,
and
a couple of things there. This annual plan, as I understand it, runs from 1st of July 2020 to 31st of, from 1st of July this year to 30th of June next year. And I did hear yesterday when I was watching some of your hearings that work is not scheduled to start until April next year. Well, that's actually part of this particular financial year. I don't know how they would feel. I understand that some of the work involves electrical infrastructure, some of which might not involve such big holes. I don't know how they would feel if you put it off for a year, but I do know that they're not particularly happy about some of the concepts that have been put forward. And I believe Brent Weatherall's sort of leading the charge on commenting about that. And I think you're going to hear from him tomorrow. So he'd be the one to ask.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying though is, we see the situation with Aurora where work's been deferred and then it comes at a cost later on.
Absolutely.
And the engineers are telling us this work does need done. So I think we have to consider that.
Fine. All I've done is just said what our views are, and obviously you've got an awful lot to take into consideration over the next few weeks.
Thank you. We do. Oh, Councillor Walker.
Yeah, hi, Alistair. Thanks for the submission. You've mentioned quite a few times the term shovel ready, and I don't know if you're aware, but if you are referring to the Crown Infrastructure Partner Shovel Ready Programme, A, that is closed for application, and B, that's for. Are you aware that that's for projects that are in excess of $10 million?
Yeah, I'm totally aware of all of that. I said that I like the term shovel ready. There's an awful lot of stuff that's way overdue in our area that we have highlighted, and your previous arrangement of having transportation looking after the road parts and parts and recreation looking after overhanging trees and the likes was not successful. And I know that the new contract, I think, is starting this week. And so what we're looking for and what we're saying is that there is so much work that is shovel ready that the contractors could be getting ripped into all of this now while plans are being made for the big ticket items a bit further down the track.
Fine, that's fine. So I guess that leads to a supplementary question. So how, it's a question we're going to have to juggle after these submission processes. But how do we square the circle in terms of, I guess, ceding to the demands that are being made of us within the context of a demand for a zero rate rise?
Can you just repeat that? I believe you're a bit quiet there.
Yeah. It's just basically how do you suggest we square the circle in terms of agreeing to the plethora of projects we're being asked to progress in the context of being asked by many people for a zero rate rise?
Yeah, with the information that's in the public domain, such as the bigger ticket capital projects that have been mentioned many, many times, if some of those are deferred, put on hold or cancelled, that's obviously going to put a bit of money back into the pot. What we have said is that we support the idea of having a good look at this potential rates rise or reducing it or bring it to zero. I don't know. Presumably the staff are going to bring you a number of different scenarios, a lot of what if things. If you reduce it by a little bit, this would happen and all the rest of it. So again, that's what the film star wages are for councillors to look at all these things.
Yeah, to have a film star wage. And I think it goes, I guess another question is, do you think Councillor O'Malley's comment of yesterday, I think, and correct me, Councillor O'Malley, if I'm wrong, where you described in the context of what I've just asked, that's being between a rock and a hard place?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reddick.
Yes, thanks for your submission, Alistair. I just have a question about Shortcut Road. You've asked for it to be sealed. And of course, it's been a gravel road with plenty of corrugations for a very long time, but it's a very popular route. However, recently there's been some members of the community, or possibly just the one, asking for it to be blocked off.
This goes back to December. The top 260 meters of it, that's the southern end, was required to be sealed as part of a resource consent that was granted for a development on the eastern side of the road. The whole thing seemed a bit daft, and we communicated that to the transportation department, that just sealing the top part of that road and then coming screaming down the hill and onto gravel was not a great idea. The whole thing did go ahead as part of the resource consent, and for it to go ahead, the road was blocked off in the middle, just by the Dons Creek Road, and it was blocked off for about a month. It was during this time that 14 residents signed a letter to us asking for this blocking off to become a permanent thing, which would allow access from top and bottom to local residents. And they came and asked us to look at doing that. The council transportation team did traffic counts that we'd asked them to do, looking at what the effects would be of blocking the road off to make it a safer place, if you like. And so we got the results back from the traffic count that showed that possibly the traffic going down Mount Cargill Road past Waitati School would probably just about double. Well, I haven't got the exact numbers with me at the moment. There's been a safety issue with Waitati School for many, many years, and we've been promised these flashing slow down signs that were supposed to have been in by now, but I'm not quite sure why they aren't. So one thing that we've spoken to the people who wanted the road closed and people who didn't want the road closed all agree that if this road was widened for the remaining 3 quarters, remember the first quarter has already been done, if it was sealed for the remaining 3 quarters, the problem basically goes away. Improve the sight lines, trim the trees on the side, and spend maybe $300,000-400,000, and that's a permanent solution to a problem that's been around for a long, long time. As a road to maintain, it's been a nightmare.
Right, because you naturally a lot of traffic would then move to Shortcut Road from the Waitati School Road.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison, for your submission and your input. And if anybody does get the opportunity to do a drive around with Alistair around the Waikouaiti Coast region, I'd wholeheartedly recommend it. Such a fine font of local knowledge. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Will do, thank you. Our next scheduled speaker is Del McLeod for 10 to 11. She is ready now. So we'll do that now. Mr. Williams is not appearing, for those of you who are keeping score at home. Sorry, I'm furiously scanning my screen to try and find you. Welcome, Del. Once you've found here we are. The next 5 minutes are all yours.
Excellent. I am going to keep this short. So, kia ora koutou. The main reason for speaking is to reinforce the collaboration between existing entities that we already have in Dunedin and outlying areas. Not just in planting, but other areas, Otago University research, the mental health of our city, the education, our farming community, business community, and many more. Our strength lies in strengthening and supporting the already existing groups and individuals, and then seeing if there are any other niches to be filled. The Green Party recently released a policy that is targeting the same, native restoration, teaming up our existing infrastructure only aids our strength. Finding how we can support the existing entities helps create more jobs. A heka, for example, need more people. Maintenance of existing planted trees will create a new workforce. Fencing, education, bringing in an iwi with their huge skill base and knowledge involves other ways. Some of the parties are working together already, some are not. Bringing in more funding, aligning with more funding bodies, creating an umbrella to support and strengthen proposals. And New Zealand has already been looked upon as a world leader, and let Dunedin lead the way with collaboration, supporting and strengthening our communities, our resilience, our waterways, our soil, our mental health, our education, our research, our businesses, and our ability to mitigate climate change, aligning with the carbon neutral 2030. Let's do this by utilising our already existing resources, as I've said many times before. Just to reiterate again, let's not reinvent the wheel, let's redefine it. That's me. You're on mute.
I'm on mute, yeah.
You
Sorry.
are. That's okay.
Hoist by my own petard. Do you happy to take questions?
Do I?
Are you happy to take questions?
Oh, yes, yes.
Oh, good. Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Bishop. Hello again, Dale. You mentioned in your presentation and in your written presentation as well, the idea of needing to coordinate a lot of this activity. You know, you and I have obviously met in the past talking about the relationship to all these activities, and the Billion Tree Fund probably being the most notable, and that the native restoration component of it has been difficult to implement because of the lack of coordination between planting groups and nurseries to grow supply. I guess my question is two parts. Do you agree with that? And what do you see as the role of an umbrella organisation?
The lack of supply is, I agree, yes. But also in talking to smaller nurseries, a lot of them are able to expand, but are unaware of the need for expansion. And so that's where I see an umbrella organisation helping, is by just linking up, connecting those dots.
Which I guess is pretty much what I expected you to say because of what we've been saying in the past. So going forward then, would you see the role of what role do you see the council having in this? Because you've mentioned already that a lot of organisations already exist out there. We don't necessarily need to create any new one, but rather need to get a coordinated activity running through those. So what role do you see would be probably coming out of our Parks and Recs department? What role would you see the council doing if it had a role here?
The main one is support. I am volunteering, and as we all know, voluntary time can sometimes be quite sporadic. I'm not saying that personally I'm the person for coordinator, but I do see an incredible need for this, and a lot of people that I've been talking about have supported this as well. Something else that I see the council helping with is to be there for the already existing entities when they say that they need things. Either it might not be monetarily, it might be to help with the people resources, or to tie in schools with plantings, that kind of stuff. So to help, and the council already does this, but just to reinforce that.
Great. Would you accept maybe the term herding cats might be one of the issues we're dealing with, and trying to get everybody in the room at the same time?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I understand also with communities, there's also, there can be tension at times, and that's understandable. I grew up in a small village, and I also Waitati, there's tensions that come up and then they disappear again, or they get sorted, and it's the main thing. But when you get them all in the room, it is a case of herding cats. When you have, and when you talk to them on an individual basis, they tend to be more approachable and more amicable with getting together for the bigger picture, which is where I see this as a necessary resource.
So that could be a role maybe the council could play there. So it wouldn't necessarily be particularly monetary, but more a supportive role.
Definitely. What I do see in the council is a lack of time, and I see that all over the place, including the businesses. That is something that I do have, which is why I'm volunteering currently.
Great, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Walker.
Hey Del, your room looks so cozy, and unlike the fridge I'm sitting in at the moment.
Yes.
I think, thanks to Councillor O'Malley, I think you might have answered the question, but I couldn't quite tease out from your submission just clearly and precisely it was what you were asking for. So are you actually asking for funding for a coordinator, and if so, for which group? But I think it was partially answered. Can you just maybe clarify?
Absolutely. There's two things that are working right now at the moment. This needs a team, so help collaborating the team would be great, and funding for a coordinator would be excellent. I know the DCC is not a deep-pocketed pool, but or helping find funding of some kind, and they would be two resources that would be incredibly useful. But also what I see as the bigger picture is aligning this with the carbon-free 2030 plan, and that includes the policy analysis, etc. And that's something that I don't see as being marketed right now, and I see that as a very targetable, a marketable focus that the DCC could align with as well.
Excellent answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Barker.
Kia ora, Dale. I just have one question around, we've talked about funding for a position, and I wonder if there is another way of looking at doing a position about whether it's about resources, office space, connectivity, some of those things that council can provide, given there's a whole lot of databases, connections into the community if we haven't got any money, which is a bit challenging. Do you think there might be another way of looking at helping a coordinator in that position?
I totally agree. Yes, there are many different ways. The reason why I look at funding is because anything that isn't funded then becomes sporadic. And with money, unfortunately, usually you get more, goals and targets that need to be met, and you can put more demands on that. And so that's why where it turns from voluntary to something that becomes a little bit more tangible and a little bit more targeted, and that's where something can be more. You're nodding. I'm losing words. More resilient. It becomes a more resilient position.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Elder. You're on mute.
Yep, sorry. Kia ora, and thanks for your submission. And there is a lot of people in this space. There's also pools of funding in this space as well, but like you say, it's not integrated. And do you see having initially a hui with all the little stakeholders together, just to start to get a bigger picture, and maybe also having a look at funding options that are out there as well in that hui? Definitely.
Councillor O'Malley has already had a hui to pull together the planters and the community, and Riverstone, is it? Nurseries and spokespeople from lots of different areas. I put my hand up as a coordinator because there was a need for a coordinator, and because I'd been looking at it for a while. I definitely think a hui would be excellent to collaborate a team, because it is, there is strength in pulling teams together, and then weaknesses are covered by other people that can cover, wrapping around a little bit. But yes, I agree, and yes, this is something that I quite often hear, is that there are funding pools around, even in the native regeneration, but people don't know about them, and they don't know how to apply, or time becomes a factor. And for me, yes, I would love a hui. I would love to find already existing resources, and most of all, I think there's a need for help to apply for the funding, whether it's time restricted or ability to do it. The unknown, that I think would be really, really good to have as a resource.
Yes, because 1 Billion Trees program does have funding, but it's knowing pulling all the bits together and knowing how to integrate it. And
Absolutely.
I think, yeah. Okay.
Sorry, keep going. Oh, I agree. I think the 1 billion trees and trees that count and forest and bird and so there's from wetlands to native forest, there's lots of resources available. So how we can tap into that would be great. Exactly.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Kia ora, Del. Could I, this is something slightly off the topic of what you've been talking about, but can I check, are you the Del who has done a lot of film stuff as well?
Yes.
Yes, great. My question is around that, because we're looking at, as you would have seen in some of the plans, that maybe trying to get some funding to have a film studio, studio and things here. Do you think that, what advantages of that for our city can you see, given your connections and your background in the film industry?
I have left the film industry a little while back.
Right, yeah.
The advantage...
You don't need to answer.
No, that's okay. There's many... That's okay. There are many advantages. Before coronavirus and lockdown happened, I would have been extolling the virtues of doing that. We've looked at making a sound studio in Central, which was a really good idea. What it does is it supports the existing industry and it pulls in a lot of money from overseas, because a lot of them base in Auckland or Wellington and then don't really go that far, or they come down here for location shooting and then they go to another studio in Auckland or Wellington, and all that money gets pulled up. Now, I'm not sure. I know that there is an existing kind of emerging, really, really strong film base again. I know that there's also an incredible pool of skills and talents in the industry in Dunedin from many different areas. But
do you see that?
I wouldn't say I am involved in the industry now enough to make a educated assessment.
But if we were lucky enough to get some funding from the government to move forward with that, do you think it could create a lot of work here in Dunedin, bring work to Dunedin?
I think it could pull people to Dunedin. I think if there is an already existing infrastructure, and Anthony Duca has been working very hard on getting that up and running, then there's definitely the skills and resources and talent in Dunedin to be able to make that happen. And also that aligns with a lot of the things that Dunedin has going for it, like locations that are really, really close, that that people could come down and utilize the studio and use the locations and spend more money in this area, as long as they include locals, because some people come and they bring a huge big team, all the money goes to the team and they don't really involve very many locals. That is in the past. It might be different now.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Del. Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate your submission and thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you. Excellent.
Next we have Richard Hall on behalf of the Otago Boys High School Sports Council. Welcome, Richard. You're on mute. You're still on mute.
My apologies.
And now you are no longer. The next 5 minutes are yours. You put yourself back on mute.
That's all right. Thank you. Look, pleasure to be here this morning and thank you for the opportunity. I realise that you're in a number of these meetings at the moment, so I'll try and be as concise and specific as I can. First of all, I want to thank the DCC, particularly Robert West, Andrew Kennelly and Peter, the team that we've been working with, I think really positively over the last 16 to 18 months in terms of the care and maintenance of Littlebourne. And they've done all that they can, and they've been very cooperative with us, and I hope they would feel the same. And you know, the DCC have got good staff there, and I think that's really important to acknowledge. What we're asking for here is we're asking for a significant amount of money, and we realise it's a significant amount of money. but we want to make a submission respectfully for the learning of 800 students. And I think that's my first and most important point to the council this morning is we're not making this submission on behalf of rugby or of cricket or any of those sorts of things that we may be perceived to be only interested in. I'm making this submission on behalf of 800 boys who use Littlebourne every day. It is a classroom, and that's really fundamentally what we need it to be. Physical activity is very important to a young person's well-being, as well as to their development in terms of physical, but also emotional, and also resilience and connection with community. And if this COVID-19 shutdown of schools for, we're getting close to 6 weeks now, has taught us anything, those connections are absolutely vital. And boys make those connections often through physical activity. Not all of it's necessarily that positive, I'll admit, but they make those connections through that physical activity. And that is what we really need to bear in mind here. So Littlebourne for us is a classroom. It's used every single day in a variety of lessons, not just physical education. We only have one gymnasium on site. And one of the things that I'm having to look at really closely is how in a level 2 scenario with 1 metre distancing, we're going to be able to use a gymnasium for anything more than one class of 25 students. Littlebourne could have 3 or 4 classes. However, as we know, in winter, the weather makes Littlebourne unusable for 2 to 3 weeks every year. And that is something that I think is really unacceptable to us in this modern age. I think I want to really emphasise also, we're in a unique position here. I've been part of several schools in my teaching career, 4 of them boys' schools. This is the only school I know of that has a field that actually isn't owned by the Ministry of Education. And the irony of that is the Ministry of Education are not even aware that they don't own Littlebourne. And I know that for a fact because they toured here in November and I spoke at length about the issues we had with space. And they were fascinated to find out that the Ministry of Education or Otago Boys High School boundary ends at the footpath just by the grandstand. So, we need to work together. It's not a situation that perhaps necessarily you want to be in. It's certainly not a situation I possibly want to be in. But the Ministry of Education is very happy with the fact that we are dealing together and they're not having to be part of this conversation. The benefit to us of having a classroom is that we can have learning, and that learning is absolutely vital to us. But we also do accept our role as a community provider. I mean, for instance, in 2014, Otago Boys High School and the Community Trust upgraded the cricket nets that sit on the Littlebourne ground. Now, that was a $70,000 project. That's coming up for renewal shortly, and the Ministry of Education don't fund that because it's not their ground. So we funded it with community contributions and Old Boys. We didn't ask the DCC for a single amount of funding towards that project. And if you drive up Stewart Street, you will see that those nets are probably the most used cricket nets in Dunedin, constantly every weekend. Many of you possibly have taken your children down there or your grandchildren down there. And I think that's a really important point. Otago Boys High School under my leadership has really tried to maintain an open philosophy whereby we are a community school and we see the importance of us as not just 8:30 till 3:30 Monday to Friday. I want to really also tackle something that I think is important. This application is not about elitism. This is not about Otago Boys High School's first 15 or anything like that, as I mentioned earlier. This really is about the learning for 800 students. The last time my research, I can find out that Littlebourne had an upgrade of the turf such as we're proposing was 1963. So it's not like we are coming back to you constantly for funding in terms of this regard. And if we're successful in the outcome that we want, I guarantee you I won't be back to you ever again. And that the idea with that is really that we want to advocate, as I said, for a decent upgrade, the option 3 that's in our submission, which was done with working with Robert and his team, because we see that as the long-term benefit for the students. Ironically, we know that means Littlebourne's going to be out of action for probably most of the summer, and we're prepared to accept that because we see that short-term pain really has long-term gain for us. In terms of our student wellbeing, I commissioned surveys through an Australian company a New South Wales organisation called Awesome Schools. It's actually run by a New Zealander, which is why I use that firm. And we know over 2 or 3 years that we surveyed our boys, unsurprisingly, their well-being goes down during these winter months. The opportunity to get outside, to have some grass on your feet, to have a bit of a run round is absolutely central to us maintaining and keeping those boys elevated in terms of their well-being. Littlebourne's situation means that at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it starts to lose the sun on the southern and western side. So it becomes very boggy and it stays very boggy. And that's something that's really, we can't do anything about, but it does mean that 800 students can't use the ground. I was conservative looking at some numbers, and if we did 400 boys use that field, which is half the school every day, 5 days a week for 40 weeks, that's 80,000 movements you have on Littlebourne. Respectfully, I would question which other council facility, aside from perhaps Minor Pool, has that sort of traffic, and certainly no park possibly has. The boys compact the ground. That's the issue. The issue is that whatever Peter and his team do, they can't actually get the ground up to its best possible state because the boys running around on it compact the top level and therefore the drainage doesn't happen, which is why it's got to have the work that it needs to.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Sorry, your 5 minutes is up. I was only interrupting to let you know that.
That's pretty much it. Thank you. I think I'll just end up repeating myself, but thank you very much.
I tried to find a natural pause in proceedings. Are you happy to take questions? You happy to take questions?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Hall, for your passionate submission and a very clear submission. Look, I've got absolutely no doubt about the benefits of this and the importance of it, but I do have a question to ask you around the current context with COVID-19 and how that's just changed everything. You mentioned it being another classroom. Do you have any ability within your school community, as you have with other projects, to source some funding for this, even though you don't own the ground? And also, in these extraordinary times, is it worth another approach to the Ministry of Education, given the comments you make, which I absolutely understand, around the mental health of your boys as well as their physical health? I would have thought in these extraordinary times, possibly the ministry may have another approach to it. But I just asked that question to see what you think.
No, fair question, and thank you, Councillor Gary. Short answer to that is I have been waiting since 2017 for them to upgrade the earthquake Shan building, which I've had to close this year because it's dangerous. They have toured the school in November. We spent 2.5 hours talking about access, talking about space, and I'm still to wait for any follow-up. So I'd love to be able to use that. The reality is I'll die before that happens, of old age.
And you don't think that this new situation with COVID and all that means would change that?
I would like to be optimistic and say that it would. The reality is the processes of the Ministry of Education Property Division are so slow that it would just take. I would be waiting years.
Sure, thank you.
Richard, what is your ground rent for the park to use it? What do you pay to use it?
Honestly, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I think I can find that out for you.
Yeah, just curious. Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Worship. Kia ora, Richard. Forgive my ignorance about the Littlebourne ground. I heard you mention that you have local public access to it. I also wondered, apart from the 800 boys that use it, are there any other local schools like Otago Girls that might have access to it or need for it?
Yeah, no, great question. Thank you very much, Councillor. There is an artificial cricket wicket which can be booked and is used every Friday night by junior teams. Yes, other groups can use it and do use it. Littlebourne is actually bookable through the Dunedin City Council website. If you look on that website, you will see very few bookings because we're actually told not to book it. We've been asked not to book it. I don't know why, but we have, so we've followed the procedure. But yes, no, it can be booked and it can be used by other groups, obviously outside of normal school hours. Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Do you know when the last time the field was aerated?
It gets, I think last year, at the end of last year, there's a slice, and then they do try to do coring once a year. There is a very short window of time where they can do this. Talking with Peter, who's the chief groundsman that works on Littlebourne, under the old 3-term year that many of us would have gone through for schools, there was a month window between summer sport finishing and winter sport beginning, etc. Now, with the 4-term year, that's all compacted. And so he gets very little time to do that. But it does happen. It's happened more regularly since we started improving the relationship, shall we say, really making an effort on our part.
So what you've just said then is that even though the field is a DCC field, your grounds team have been maintaining and doing that work.
No, sorry, I mean Peter is your person.
Okay, all right, okay. So when we look at should we proceed with the work that you're suggesting, there will still be a upkeep of the field afterwards by the team to ensure that it on an annual basis.
Yep, there will be. The aeration and things that happen work, but again, it's that constant compacting by 800 boys that really negates that quite quickly. But certainly we will work with that team and do whatever they say to do our bit. There's no doubt about that.
Perfect, thank you.
And Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, I can't refer, it's a bit tricky on my screen to refer back to the submission, but can you just clarify, do you put some money into that as well? Does the school put some money in already?
No, we don't. We do not currently. We don't have any ministry funding that's tied towards grounds, and as you can imagine, all of my ministry funding is tied up in projects within the school or just maintenance within the school. So no.
Can I clarify? So Littlebourne is, I believe I've just checked, and it sounds like there's no rent actually paid by the school for that ground. So it is public ground though, is that correct?
As far as I'm aware, it is. Yes, it is. It is in a unique position, Councillor.
Yeah.
About that. Yeah.
Because that's what I was going to say. It sounds like the public can't use that ground during school hours.
No, that would be a significant health and safety issue for us.
For you, okay. And
I just know, Arthur Street School will come and practice athletics there and things like that. Right. Those things will happen, but a community event and obviously involved in the school grounds or just people using it, no, we can't for health and safety reasons.
Right. It also sounds like the students using it so often is impacting on the quality of it, isn't it? So that's what's actually causing the problem.
Yeah, it's the kids using the ground, which is what we want. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So has anyone, obviously if it's council land, I don't know, I mean obviously council has to talk about this, but would the Ministry of Education be interested in buying that land if it ever became available? Because it sounds like it's almost quite exclusively used by your school, and that would help, it's integrated with the school. I don't know whether the public will be happy with that. I'm only just asking that question to pose, because it seems to me that land is the things that the kids are doing on the school is causing the problem, not through the fact that they're using it, which is great, they're using it, and there's no rent paid by the school and no one else can really use it through the day. So it is pretty much used mostly by the school. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think that is fair to say. It is, as I said, it's a unique position. The Ministry of Education property team that visited in November that I mentioned, they're going to form what's called a business case for Otago Boys High School, which is looking at the next 25 years at our needs as a school. I would love to make a submission as part of that business case that the Ministry of Education purchases the Littlebourne ground.
Right. Okay. I don't know whether the council even wants to do that, but that might be a question that you have with the council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Hall, for your submission and for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
No, thank you very much and appreciate your time.
Keeping with the education theme, we have Steve Turnbull next from Concord School. I think. Can you hear us, Steve?
Your worship, we'll give him a ring and just see what's happening.
Okay, do you want to remove? I'll remove him. Shall I remove?
Yeah.
Oh no, I don't want to do that. Oh God. So we have Michael Lee in the waiting room. We can do that now. In the meantime. You're on mute, Michael. But once you've found that button, the next 5 minutes are all yours, should you need them.
Southern Jewelers, Dunedin's oldest jewelers and watchmakers. And I've come here to speak today about the George Street plan and my comments are that it's it's chaos and obstruction, and it's going to affect business. And excuse me for a minute. Yeah, I'm just busy, mate. We close at the moment. Where's me clock? Don't forget it. Yeah. Sorry about that. It's a bit of an interruption here.
We're all multitasking in this new environment, Michael. Don't worry.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, well, I'm sorry about that. But look, I wanted to talk about a few things, but I see that you're going to wanting to dig up George Street and turn it into one lane and all this. I have actually worked as a drain layer when I left school, my company in Dunedin, and so I was brought up with that. But what I wanted to say is that the traffic flow worked relatively well for decades, and Dunedin's character for 100 years has worked well there. But in the last 5 years or so,
Michael, might I suggest you get better reception at the front of the shop than at the back of the shop?
Oh, well, I'll try and come out there.
Some issues hearing you there.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, well, as I say, the traffic flow worked well for years, but over the last few years, first with the little red arrows for pedestrians crossing, then the unnecessarily overly slow barn dance, loss of lanes. There used to be like 2 lanes up the main street, and now there's like only one, and it's quite often that's the second, there's two cars, one's trying to turn, and it's thereby hindering all traffic flow to a snail's pace. Some days it's like a roadblock, I've noticed, from like the Market Reserve right up to George Street. And then there's the cycle lanes. I mean, they're in there now. There's not much we can do about it. what I'm trying to say is that they're ridiculously oversized and dangerous. I'm all for a cycle lane, but we don't need that much. It's a traffic flow, and it's a hindrance to the businesses and the character of Dunedin. And I feel it's been destroyed over the last few years. And along with, like the absolutely stupid flower boxes up the main street, they're just unnecessary in the way of buses, traffic. Yes, if you've got to do some maintenance on the drains, do it. But to go and spend 60 million on doing this up, making it into one lane where the one-way systems are already hindered, ridiculously hindered. That's the main highway through from Invercargill. It's going to get, it's already bad. And then, you used to be able to shoot through the town belt. You can't even get through there now it's absolutely ridiculous. You've ruined that Maori road. It's with the judder bars through there. You can blame NZTA, but this is our problem. Everyone I know in business is complaining about it. But a lot of them just can't come to these meetings or come and talk to the council. I feel you should be doing other things like fixing the roads, like up Princess Street. It's been there for years. It's actually from a motorcycle thing. There's all these little holes along George Street, and that's even hindered to one lane. There's the Police Street Islands. They're unnecessary. There's down at Portsmouth Drive, there's another big hindrance of an island where you can't even turn to go down the Bay Road. Even the Bay Road should be getting on with finishing that properly rather than trying to close off bloody George Street. It's the same with there's exits around the gardens area, around the Chinese gardens. You've got to go. You can't just turn back in round by Snap Fitness. You've got to go round to the bloody near to the Oval. It worked well for years. And
thank you, Mr. Lee. Your 5 minutes is up. Are you happy to take questions? Should there be any?
I'm just about finished.
You are finished. That's what I've come to tell you. I've got questions though, if you wish to answer them.
Yes, I'm happy to do my best with that.
No worries, Councillor Barker. You're on mute, Councillor.
Sorry. Thank you, Your Worship. Kia ora, Michael. The council is currently surveying businesses and residents to see what ideas they might have to help businesses recover after COVID-19 and the shutdown. I wonder if you've got any proactive ideas that you'd like to share with us.
Well, I have, but it's sort of caught me off guard a bit. There's people, the traffic's getting around at the moment, but it's going to be double that when it's completely locked down. The lockdown has come off. But when we get down to level, the lower levels and come off all these levels altogether, it's going to be back and even worse than it was before. It was bad enough before with all the the judder bars and the traffic. Unless you can't even use 2 lanes up the main street, and then now you want to turn that into 1 lane. So that's another project that we're looking at starting next year. I just wonder if there's anything in the interim that council can do to help businesses to recover from the shutdown. We'll just stop spending unnecessary money. Another 60 minutes, finish off the jobs like the Bay Road that you're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Drains, but this is ridiculous.
Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you, Mr. Lee. Do you feel like you've been fully consulted on some of the things that are happening around the city that you've got concerns about? Do you feel like you were able to have input or knew it was happening?
Well, not really. You know, like I've lived in Dunedin all my life. I've done a lot of things. You know, as far as the COVID-19 thing, you know, I set up I was the coordinator of an AIDS prevention agency, and which you know, I was the only paid coordinator of that, and it's now got the lowest rate of HIV and AIDS prevention in the world, because you know there's lots of other things I do, but you know I'm also running a business. I've got my hand in a lot of pies. You know, everyone's complaining about this, but the consultation, I don't know. I just see what I see on Facebook and, you know, read in the papers, and then I see another flower box or that stupid obstruction of, you know, Stewart Street last year. That was all just a total waste of money. Like Dunedin's character was built around by the early settlers around the city, and it's worked for 100 years. We just need to get rid of some of these stupid obstructions, which that someone might get run over there. People don't get run over. They learn to travel around it. As far as me being contacted, no. Well, I suppose not really. I mean, I'm not in
Okay.
the
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Do you have any concerns if George Street went to one lane? Do you have any concerns for your business?
Of course, you know, there's no parking already. You know, like my mum and lots of other, you know, it's fine for young people that want to bloody, you know, just sit around a cafe and, you know, vape all day and sit around, you know. But the average person, it's businesses. And yes, it's going to affect my business. People are already, cars are pushed further and further. They used to have a feel-good factor with business. This is the oldest jewelers in Dunedin. People used to like, oh, I'll go into town, I'll go into George Street, have a look around. The feel-good factor has gone. It's a nightmare to get into town. People don't want to go there unless they've got an appointment, or, you know, it's an obstacle. Dunedin is now a pain in the ass from what the council have done the last few years. But yes, going back to the other question, no, I haven't been consulted. Why would you? Because I'm not in the council. You know, if there's anything I could do, you know, yes, I'd love to be consulted, but really, I've been to some of these meetings before, and really, you just listen, you know, you're nice and, you know, respectful and all that, but nothing happens. You know, you should just get on with your multi-million-dollar plans and borrow more and more money. And you know, this is not what the people of Dunedin. Yes, I mean, we get all these new people that move in. Oh, yeah, I've done that in London, or I've done that overseas. This is what they're doing. And Cuba Mall will close this off. It's all bullshit. You're destroying fucking Dunedin.
Mr. Lee, thank you for your passion. We are running short of time, so I'm going to have to stop you there. And as has been mentioned before, the Central City Plan work has been a long time coming, and I've very fond memories of sitting in workshops with you at the Public Art Gallery, and it's in the early stages of its gestation. So thank you for your input ongoing on these issues, and thank you for joining us this morning. We've found Mr. Turnbull, or at least have hopefully corrected his or worked through the technical issues.
Yeah, okay.
Can someone let him in? We have the same black square we met last time. Can you hear us, Steve? It would appear not. Can we let Dave Hannon in, please? Welcome, Mr. Hannon. Once you've found your mute button, the next 5 minutes are all yours.
Hi, does that work?
Yeah, go for it.
Right, thank you very much for coming along to this very unusual council meeting. I guess I'm here to talk about rubbish and organics, recycling, wheelie bins, and just a general lie of the land with recycling and rubbish. First one I want to talk about is organics. You know, I noticed on the website you said there was going to be a preference for 3 or 4 bins. I don't think that actually provided the city ratepayers with much of an understanding about what was going on with the costs and risks associated with an organics bin. The risks, I think, are incredibly high, and I think council really just needs to take a bit of stock on whether this is the right way to go or not. If you refer to my organics spiel, the risks are significant. You know, we're talking about potentially 15,000 tonnes of recycling or that could be processed annually. And this would effectively, that exposes the city to quite an extensive range of liabilities with lack of control over the feedstock of the compost. So, you know, not really saying I don't oppose organics recycling. I really want to encourage that to happen. I just feel that the risk is quite significant, and I would encourage the city to actually start in a small kind of pilot size scale way, working with polytechs, universities, that kind of thing. There has been some design work done in the past, working with these people to try and develop a pilot scale composting operation. And with a pilot scale composting operation, you can really test the system to make sure it actually works. You've got control of the feedstock, you know the risks involved, you know how to make it, you know that there's good process control, and you know what sort of product you're going to make at the end of the day, and whether it's going to be sellable or not. Half the battle is actually trying to define a market. So if I could draw your attention to my submission here, which you've all got in front of you, I'm assuming, and highlighting some of the risks. At the moment, if you do a citywide recycling collection, there just isn't the volume of green waste at Green Island to cater for this scale of household composting operation. Glass, just want to really talk about glass again. I've mentioned glass last year's annual plan submission. Glass is really an inert product. It's environmentally poses quite low risk, apart from perhaps standing on it or litter. You know, we spend about $500,000 a year roughly to collect about 100,000 tonnes of glass. A better method of collecting glass, if this is what's required, is to collect it very, very fast, stockpile it, crush it, and use it locally, rather than trying to colour sort it and separate it into colour where it's actually got some value. It's a very costly, time-consuming, high carbon footprint doing the method of glass that we've got at the moment. Plastics 3s to 7s, look, they're just rubbish. You know, we're just effectively giving rubbish to Malaysia, which is contaminating waterways, polluting oceans. It's just bad news. So we've really got to stop, like Christchurch City Council have done, collecting plastics 3s to 7s. 5 has probably got a little bit of value, but certainly 3s, 4s, 6s and 7s are just rubbish, and we've just got to stop doing it. We just need to dump that stuff until there is a nationally recognised plant for processing and managing this type of waste stream. Green Island sludge is a really big deal. You know, there's a lack of thought around sort of sludge processing with wastewater treatment plants. You know, the sludge goes into the landfill. It's a lot of sludge. It's 6,000 to 10,000 tonnes of sludge. Coupled with the composting plant, which I think pilot scale composting plant, you can do little wee trials of whether sludge is actually going to be worthy of composting and whether you can sell it at the end of the day and what the issues are. You know, you could incinerate sludge. It's got a calorific value. Working with some experts to try and figure out the sludge problem would be very helpful for any old landfill going forward. I think the landfill strategy or the waste strategy has failed to consider the Burnside landfill, and that's a very important part. There should be an important part of the strategy. It's got a capacity of 2 million cubic meters, potentially up to 4 million cubic meters. It takes construction and demolition waste, which is a fair chunk of the waste stream, and I think could play a significant role in the overall strategy of Dunedin's waste stream. So I'd encourage the council staff to go back and reassess how the Burnside landfill sits in with their overall picture of their waste strategy.
That's your 5 minutes, Mr. Hannon. Do you have any closing remarks quickly?
Just one or two more wee points, I guess. The regional plan waste needs to be rethought through, and I encourage council to work with the Otago Regional Council on that, because that's a very much an out-of-date document and doesn't reflect current practices. Inner city recycling, as an inner city building owner, I think we could really look to encourage and enhance inner city recycling in the inner city in a much more constructive and pragmatic way, and actually do some. I know there's depots around the place, but really they are few and far between.
Thank you. You happy to take questions, Dave?
Absolutely.
Councillor Raddick.
Yes, just a couple. Thanks for your presentation. There's quite a lot of information there. Firstly, about organics. The batch you referred to in Timaru is 7,000 tonnes. It's quite a large batch of compost. What about if we were to, have much smaller batch sizes, so we could exercise better control and perhaps some testing of the quality and contaminants in the compost as it's produced?
That's exactly how it should be done. Small pilot scale plants, knowing and understanding your feedstock is critical to compost control. Going out to the entire city is just a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. So working with restaurants, organic suppliers, and controlling and understanding what you are producing is absolutely critical to actually producing good quality compost. If you go full scale, you're going to kill all compost manufacturing markets, or potentially kill all composting manufacturers in Dunedin, because the volume is going to be so massive.
Given our scale and the whole marketing of it, and as you say, we need to be able to sell it. I imagine that that's what we would do as we, moving forward. The other thing, incineration of sludge. You're saying there's a lot of sludge being deposited at Green Island. My understanding is that it's currently being incinerated at Te Huna in a pretty high-tech incinerator.
Yeah, a portion of it is. There's still quite a portion going to the Green Island landfill.
Yeah, my understanding is that there's more and more getting burned as that incinerator comes up to speed.
Well, that's good. Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Hannon, I understand, is reasonably familiar with the Green Island landfill operation. Councillor Vandervis.
You said that plastics 3 to 7 are just rubbish, and that we send some of it to Malaysia and we perhaps stockpile the rest. What do you think we should be doing with plastics 3 to 7?
Well, they've got very, very low value from a recycling perspective, and you've got to consider, the three the sustainability options: environment, social, and economic responsibility of whether actually doing stuff with this plastic is worthwhile doing. So at the moment there's no market, so there's no economics. The energy required to actually get that products to Malaysia is significant, yes, it's to me just not worth doing until there is some sort of processing plant in New Zealand. Now, I would encourage the city to perhaps become that centre of processing that sort of stuff, because nationally there is no centre. That is why Christchurch City Council have chosen not to continue on with collecting that sort of stuff.
So does it just go straight to landfill in Christchurch?
I believe that's what they're planning to do. There was a stuff
Is there
article.
any option of burning it at high temperature?
Look, you know.
Is there any option of burning these plastics at high temperature?
Absolutely. You have to burn plastics at temperatures above 400 degrees. 300 to 400 degrees is where you produce dioxins, and you want to burn, if you're going to do burning of plastics, it has to be done at a very high temperature, so like 800 to 1,000 degrees.
And is that something that's feasible for Dunedin, or should we just simply accept that it is rubbish and we have to take it to landfill?
If you were going down the incineration track, it could be worthwhile exploring options other than landfilling and maybe incinerating residual waste.
Thank you.
Councillor Wiley. Oh, my apologies. Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tēnā koe, Mr. Hannon. I just wondered if you could comment on the Green Gorilla model, which is around dealing with demolition waste and construction waste.
Construction and demolition waste is a substantial portion of the waste stream. Taking apart the waste stream is also, you have to have markets for that kind of stuff. There is certain markets available in the country for doing chipboard, which is a substantial problem. It has to be clean chipboard though. Offcuts, fresh new version offcuts is worthwhile doing. Yeah, it's a tough one to break up because it's so, when you do a building, there's so much. It's just amazing the amount of construction demolition waste that comes out of one of those sites. It really is phenomenal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's the time we have for questions. Thank you, Mr. Hannon, for your submission and for your ongoing interest in Council's waste management and minimisation work. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Third time's a charm. Steve Turnbull. Who appears much like previous. Can you hear us, Steve? There's a dancing ellipsis that gives me a sense of hope. Can you hear us, Steve? You're currently on mute. I can.
Yeah, I can.
Ah, welcome. We made it.
I'm lucky.
Yeah. Let's not jinx it. The next 5 minutes are yours should you need them.
Right, okay. The issue that I'd like to bring up was, firstly, I think that the council and Transit have done some wonderful work with the roundabouts at the other end of Green Island there, and they really work well. The issue that I've got in Concord is the Burnside intersection, and pedestrians and bikes trying to negotiate that. I'm sorry, with my submission, I didn't put a map in, which I apologise for that. At the moment, the bike lanes going in and out of that intersection are really good. The ones from Green Island, and then the bike lanes start pretty much by the woodshed, really, outside of that intersection. But as a regular user, I travel from Fairfield to Concord to school. That intersection is becoming a lot busier, especially in the last 2 years. I think a lot of people coming off the motorway there at Burnside and travelling into town along Cocker Valley Road, because there's lots of it's banked up. Traffic's banked up every morning, around 8 o'clock, 8:15. My issue is that I've seen lots of past students from Concord trying to negotiate that intersection on their way to Cocker Valley College, either walking or biking. And it's a very difficult intersection to negotiate, and a very dangerous one. They're forced to cross at a very narrow part of the road at the start of Cocker Valley Road, where trucks come around and cars, but also trucks mounting the pavement. And I have seen some near misses. And I think it's talking to parents from school. They don't let their children bike or walk. They find that corner as a barrier to Green Island, Concord Green Island, through to Cocker Valley, and they prefer them, to be dropped off at school or take the bus. The difficulty is of that it's not as simple as the other end, is putting some roundabouts in, because you're limited by the bridge, the motorway bridge. So the roundabout's not going to work. And I'm not a designer, traffic designer, or anything like that. But possibly widening that road where they have to cross, although that would speed up traffic, or maybe an overbridge. I know the Greater Green Island Community Network are putting a submission in as well. I'm supporting their submission. I know the council were planning to look at that intersection when the DCC Tunnels project was possibly going to go ahead in 2021. But when I heard about that, and with our current state with COVID, the possibility of that not going ahead, and then if that doesn't go ahead, would that change would that intersection be changed? I think it needs to be looked at immediately for health and safety, because it is a concern, and I've seen kids crossing at all different parts of that intersection. The other thing is, I think with getting children on bikes and people on bikes, is that it's an easier way in to go into town, rather than go up through Concord and up to Lookout Point. So it's a much flatter way into town, and there's bike lanes pretty much most of Cocker Valley Road. Near the end there's not, but it's just a real barrier to walk, not only walking but biking, to both. It's actually quite dangerous, and it's avoided. So that was the other issue with that also is the flooding. So with that intersection, if we have heavy rain, then it floods, and can be blocked. It's been blocked off before in those heavy rains we had a few years ago. But it's not an easy fix, but it's something that I'm really concerned about when I see children trying to negotiate that intersection. So that's all I had really to say.
Thanks. You happy to take questions? Are you happy to take questions?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I am.
Great. Councillor O'Malley.
Thanks, Your Worship. Steve, I think the Tunnels Trail project is still going. And in fact, we actually went out and reached out to the government for extra money in the new infrastructure spends that they're doing. So I'm not sure you've heard that that's being shut down or not happening, because it is in fact still on the works program. The question I have for you is, that's going to cross Cocker Valley Road a little distance away from the intersection you're speaking to, possibly at least, when you come out of the end of Caversham Tunnel. How do you think that there's actually a need for a design of a safe cycleway from the end of the Caversham Tunnel back in towards the Greater Green Island and I guess the lower Concord area, like through that intersection you're talking about?
Yeah, there is. Sorry, I interrupted you. Yeah, there is, because then that a safe way, because it's not that we want that tunnel going through Wingatui, but also not only feeding into the city, but we also want it feeding into Green Island, Concord, and the south as well. And I think being able to access it both ways is really important.
effectively a method for getting Green Island to be able to get onto the other side of the southern motorway to join up with the Trails Tunnel.
Yeah.
Complex wherever it goes. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
One more question while you're on the line. When you come out of the end of the Caversham Tunnel, you're actually below grade for Caversham Valley Road. Kaika Valley Road, I should say. Would you think it may be a good idea if, when we do that construction, we try to keep a grade separation so that the cycleway can be absolutely separated from Kaika Valley Road by going underneath it at the Caversham Tunnel end?
Yeah, I mean, if that's the safest, if it's possible, it would be safe if it was separated that way.
Great.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Elder.
Thanks for your submission, and I note that you know, your students are going to bike school and are having a desire to get on a bike and go to college, etc. But I was just thinking of the larger picture. If this gets dealt with, do you see a lot of people from Green Island, Fairfield, and further afield out there using it to commute to work and using it as a alternative transport method?
Yeah, I would hope so. I think the commute to work from along Kaika Valley Road, and I've done it myself, not to work, but bike myself, it's much easier than going over Lookout Point. And the cycle lane's already there most of the way. So I would hope that putting a transition, a proper safe transition through that intersection would encourage people to do that, and we'd certainly encourage our students to do that. So it's a safe method of, as long as it's safe and easy to negotiate. Yes, I think so.
Because it's not safe for adults as well as children, is it? Really?
No, and it's not only cyclists, but it's pedestrians trying to cross that very narrow part. It's a death trap, and there's no half, like an island in the middle, and there's no clear vision either side, especially to the left-hand side. It's a very tight corner. I wouldn't want my children crossing there, and it's not only bikes, but it's also pedestrians.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve, for your patience. I'm pleased we got to have this discussion with you. Appreciate your submission and your time today.
Yeah, appreciate listening to me. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. In the waiting room, we have Mr. Iskia. And apologies for my terrible pronunciation. Can you hear us, Bob? Can you hear us, Bob?
You. Yes, I can. Thank you.
Perfect. Apologies for our lateness, but the next 5 minutes are yours should you require them.
Yeah, thank you. It was thank you for only giving me 7 minutes notice for speaking, but we're into it. Right, in my submission, you've probably see that I've got some real concerns about high rate rises, and in light of what's happened with the world in the last couple of months, I think we should be holding back, put the handbrake on hard, and just have a negative rate increase this year. What about recovering some of the company's costs, i.e. the $5 million in fine that Aurora just got recently? That should sit squarely on the shoulders of the directors and the head people of Aurora in 2016, whoever they were. They should be able to claw it back. Another thing I want to know about is the Dunedin City Endowment Fund. And what does that earn for us for a year, and where's the money spent? Another thing is some time ago, the CEO mentioned about some of our ground buildings being demolished by neglect, demolition by neglect. Well, the DCC is hard in that game as well, with demolition by neglect of 18 kilometres of railway line between Pukerangi and Middlemarch, and demolition by neglect of poor water drainage infrastructure in Mosgiel on both sides of the town. That's basically what I want to say. If you've got any questions about that, you're quite welcome to talk.
Thank you for your submission and for expanding on your written submission in your presentation this morning. Thank you for expanding upon your written submission and your presentation to us this morning. They don't appear to be questions, which is testament to the clarity of your submission, I think, Bob.
What do you want clarity on?
It doesn't appear that anybody requires clarity. I'm just saying that there are no questions from councillors. So obviously your submission has been clear and easily understood.
Yes.
So
that's very good.
Thanks for your submission and thank you for your time.
Yeah, rightio. Where do I get the answer for the Dunedin City Endowment? When will I get the answer for that?
This isn't really a forum for you to ask questions of us, but it's been raised. It's been raised in your submission, and so staff respond in due course to all of the points raised in the various submissions. But this isn't the point at which that happens.
Yeah, well, throwing $60 million of paint at George Street basically is a bit extravagant. Dunedin is far bigger than 5 square kilometres from the gardens to the Oval.
Quite right.
Yes.
Thanks,
so
Bob.
Something needs to be done about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next, we've got Pat Scott scheduled for 12. She's not here. I'm going to suggest, for the sake of everyone, that we adjourn the meeting for the next 5 minutes until we have our next scheduled presenter. Seconded, Councillor Gary. Those in favour? Those against? That's agreed. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Kia ora.
Welcome back, everyone. Oh, welcome. Welcome, Mandy. Good to hear you and see you. Welcome.
Hi. Sorry about that.
That's quite all right. And thank you for your efficiency in joining us so early to allow you to take your submission earlier than was scheduled. Just a point of clarification for my benefit as much as anything else. In your submission, you list your organisation as being the Waikouaiti Coast Community Board and yourself being a member of that. Is this a submission you're making on behalf of the board, or
no? This is me as an individual. Thanks.
That's fine. The next 5 minutes are yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Your Worship, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'd like to commend you on your patience. I watched yesterday a few of your small technical issues. I think finding muting and unmuting oneself seems to be the main feature of Zoom newbies. So here I am, midway point. Congratulations, you're at the halfway mark, and it's mayhem. Woot woot. I'm not in Wellington today at our community board executive meeting. I just left my meeting a little bit early. I do enjoy being in the comfort of my own home, but I'm over these excessive use of screens. I'd like to acknowledge the sterling work of the Civil Defence team, and in particular one of your staff members, Joy Gunn, for coordinating the Ōtepoti Community Support Network over this time. I missed hearing the community board chairs speak this morning, and I'll have to catch up on that later. I'm going to endeavour not to waste your time, but I have got a lot to say. My main focus today is on civic well-being, active transport and localism in a time of the global pandemic. A 1,000-word essay. Just before I begin, I want to say as a dog owner that I too have lost my free poo card. So I support suggestions made by Ms. Anderson yesterday regarding this. On the subject of tourism and active transport, we can promote local tourism. People visiting our rural areas from the city or wider community. Dunedin is a magical coastal place with a magical landscape, and I love this city as much as you do. I propose more cycleways. Cycling comes under active transport, commuting, community safety, which in turn makes our streets safer for youth, elderly, animals, and so does speed reduction. This also addresses our pedestrian vulnerability. So many boxes to tick there. I read an RNZ article recently, research taken in Canterbury showed that people during lockdown picking up new forms of exercise, cycling was the most popular at 78%, which topped walking at only 64%. At-home workouts and running, all of those things good for physical and mental well-being. It's a very real possibility going forward that we'll be socially distancing for maybe the next 18 months. I've heard April next year, in fact, that we'll be at level 2 until we get a vaccine. I think we have to think about the sustainability of our mental well-being. How do we make it possible for people to actually do this and stay sane and stay healthy? I think we need to think about a long-term strategy and the goal of carbon zero 2030. We can use infrastructure funding from the government for this. With a pot of money to assist, I hope the council will be starting to put their foot on the pedal. 2 days ago, I noted on RNZ that Cabinet has improved the fast tracking of shovel-ready projects, largely bypassing the RMA. I quote, Mr. Parker said the sorts of projects that would benefit for quick consenting included road and walking, cycling, rail housings, sediment removal, new wetland construction, flood management works, and projects to prevent landfill erosion. Parker said projects that include transport, environmental benefits, and housing will be prioritised under that plan. As a part of our vision for the area, the Waikouaiti Coast Community Board and individual community members will be making submissions to the Regional Transport Plan and the DCC long-term planning in support of cycleways in the wider area. It's our intention to establish a local trust, and it will be good to know that the City Council supports this. This project will be very much community pedalled. I believe the wonderful Emily Cooper has emailed through the work that she's done on this project today. I don't think we'll have any issue seeking funding and support from local businesses. And it's my belief that the labour involved in this will be undertaken by local contractors and volunteers. We'll endeavour to get these listed as subcontractors with the operations team once the project gathers momentum. We also have the support of this project from Hamish Seaturn, the track builder, and I noticed that he will be speaking to you tomorrow, as is Sarah Neatis, and we support her vision from our community board. I recently made contact with Phil Dowsett, whom you also heard from yesterday, and he's happy to lend his project planning knowledge and skills to this. Once we have the feasibility study information and the firmer track plans, we'll be putting in a shared pathway application for the proposed trails to Kiwi Rail land. I see huge potential to connect our communities and create economic gain for rural areas. It would be great to have a citywide shared pathway fast track to shovel-ready projects, not just pipeline ones. To quote Mr. Hawkins, these could help support a sustained region-wide economic recovery in the lower South Island. This is something I'm very passionate about, along with social well-being. Right now, I feel like economic growth mindset should take a back seat. We should be looking at social and environmental benefits for our communities. Better social cohesion.
Mandy, your 5 minutes is up, so if you wanted to wrap up quickly, that would be grand.
Oh, damn. Better social cohesion will come from supporting local going forward. We need to hear about all the social challenges and concerns, removing obstacles for greater resilience. Key factors are identifying the preference for those we advocate for. To me, this is good governance. Accessibility for all communities. Mobility scooters, wheelchairs, prams on paths, accessible parking. I work as a carer in mental health and I advocate for all of my clients. It's a human right issue. I echo comments made by bus supporter Peter Dowden yesterday. We need to reduce bus fares, offer community service discount, increase services. During my election campaign, one of my focuses was on improving bus stops. I requested information from ORC under Lagoima about how many bus shelters that do not have seating, only leaning rails. The response I got was, of the 817 stops on the Dunedin network, 331 have shelters, 80 of these have leaning rails, the remaining 251 have seating, and a quick calculation tells me 155 have no shelters whatsoever. This is something that needs...
Mandy, I'm going to have to ask you to stop. I'm going to have to ask you to stop there. Thank you for your submission. Appreciate your input. Are you happy to take questions?
For sure. Grill me.
Barker.
Thank you, Worship. Kia ora, Mandy. Lovely to see you, and thank you for your presentation. I'm just curious about how many, with the transportation access from the Waikawaiti coast, how many people commute into the city for work each day?
I don't actually have those statistics, Councillor Barker, but
Is it a large amount?
Yes, I'd say so.
I'm just curious about, we've talked a bit about cycleways, and I wonder, people have been talking about Dunedin railways and perhaps looking at commuter rail. So I wondered what might be the potential of the market for the North Coast to use rail to come into Dunedin City.
Our population is close to 5,000 with 800 in Waitati, and I know that a lot of people in our community do actually cycle into the city, but Waitati, of course, is closer than Waikawaiti.
Thank you for that.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Worship. Hello, Mandy. With this cycleway trust that you're planning on forming, is that going to be related to the Oamaru to Dunedin mooted cycleway, so an interregional or intercity cycleway?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. You'll be looking to see that impact report that apparently was paid for by the council and the Waitaki District Council as well, then when that's available, I assume.
Yes, the feasibility study. We're very interested to hear about that. And as most of our cycleways will actually follow the state highway, I believe there'll be some NZTA funding available because of that proximity to the highway.
Excellent. Under the safety program as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elder.
Hi, thanks for that, Mandy. I was just wondering, given tourism is now going to be more focused in the near immediate term, locally, regionally, and domestically, how do you see that fits in with tourism and the coastal area, having a cycleway?
Well, I think it's going to be vital, Rachel. Thank you for your question, Councillor Elder. I do believe that our focus going forward will very much be on local tourism, promoting ourselves to the greater nation, and on perhaps city dwellers visiting our gorgeous rural coastline too.
I think there's going to be more emphasis on staycations. So people, instead of going somewhere, will instead look locally for a holiday. Can you talk about maybe Dunedin people visiting, say, Karatani or whatever?
Absolutely. Well, it's only an hour's pedal away if you come up and over those great volcanic hills, and then you hit a lot of plain sailing. You know, it's pretty amazing flat roads along the coastal chain there. And apart from those small connecting pieces, Waitati to Warrington and Karatane to Waikuiti, the coast road is very rideable at the moment, and I see that they are the two immediate first focuses on our Oamaru to Dunedin cycleway, would be connecting Waitati and Warrington, which is just a short stretch of the highway, and then Karatane, Waikuiti.
Thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Kia ora, Mandy. Thanks for your great submission. And I just wanted to ask a different question, which was around your networks through your work. And we've asked other people about this. We heard about issues during lockdown for access to food was a big issue welfare-wise. Now we're hearing that reassurance is going to be really important for a lot of the older community. With the community that you work with in your work capacity, what are people's immediate needs as we move into recovery mode?
I find that people living out here rurally are actually pretty well equipped and used to self-isolating because of the geography of where we are. But working in the mental health field, I feel that actually civic well-being is going to be our largest focus, and that's where I think active transport comes in, because physical exercise and good mental state of health, I think they go hand in hand, and we need to be encouraging people to do what they need to do each day to feel good about themselves physically and mentally. If we're looking at 18 months of social distancing, I don't know, but you know, to me, I think active transport needs to be some significant importance placed on that.
Excellent, thank you.
Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Kia ora, Mandy. I wondered, because you're quite, rural where you are, how has the COVID situation affected the rural communities? What are you seeing economically, like the farmers and the businesses there? What are they saying, and how is it affecting them? Everybody's having a tough time, but are some of your businesses saying they're going to close down, or are they looking like they'll get through this? What's
I think it's about 50-50, Councillor Houlihan. Some local businesses have been able to provide a delivery service at level 3, and they're sort of quietly rebooting themselves. We're fortunate to have some locally grown food operators that have been distributing veggie boxes, but I think it's those other businesses that will be suffering. We haven't actually had a chance to connect with all of our businesses, because I guess we're waiting until we hear from government in the next few days about what level 2 is going to look like. I know that they've definitely lost money over this lockdown period, and how quickly they can reboot themselves going forward is going to be vital for their economic well-being.
Thank you so much. I think your work is vital, that you do, that people like yourself do with people, especially in mental health, because are you seeing that people are a bit feeling, they're saying one of the symptoms could be that people could get a bit depressed. Is that something with any of your clients, you know, without going into detail, but that they're that you're noticing?
Not just my clients. I think
Well,
that
yeah.
all of us, we're all a little susceptible, aren't we? Especially
Yeah.
those with the artistic dispositions. Everyone can be a little up and down. It's untrue what they say. There is depression in New Zealand.
Yeah, absolutely. You take care, Mandy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mandy, for your submission and for your time today. I appreciate it.
I wish I could have said all the things about localism that I intended to add in there. I know you'll be hearing from Nikki Bold this afternoon about food networks.
Yeah,
And
great.
I just hope going forward, growth and development of the city requires a social vision and support of community enterprise. I think we need to support all our existing businesses to
Mandy.
thrive. Thank you, Your
Yeah.
Worship.
A slight deviation from schedule. Ms. Douglas at 12:30 won't be presenting. The submission from the Property Council was in the name of Mr. Thomas, but it will be presented by Mr. Marsh, who will be making his way into the room presently. Welcome, David, sitting distantly there at the end of your board table. And you're on mute, and once you take yourself off mute, the next 5 minutes are yours.
Should be working now.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, great. Okay, I'd like just to start off. I hope everyone's got their pants on. For people who don't know me, my name's David Marsh, representing the branch president of the Property Council of the Otago chapter. I'd also like to introduce our senior advocacy advisor, Property Council, Natala Tropatova. She might be presenting later next issue.
She appears to be in the room presently, so careful what you're saying.
Right, okay. Right, so basically about the Property Council, we're a leading advocate of the property sector and our purposes together to shaping cities and making communities thrive. COVID-19, the global COVID epidemic, has created uncertainty, financial insecurity for both households and businesses alike. For that reason, we give a significant consideration to the impact on our members in the New Zealand economy. So first of all, we look at the rates increases. We think that it should be zero. Obviously, everyone is hurting a lot, and we need to find ways to achieve that. We see actions needed as asset sales. Should be put into action, forestry companies sold, Waipori Fund liquidated, equity partner found for Aurora. So basically stripping the council back down to essential services with about a 20% less staff to keep it solvent. In regards to infrastructural projects, we do have some worries, like the Otago project was an embarrassing disaster, especially for our members, a financial disaster for them. So we're saying this should be put on hold or basically put it in the reject bin. George Street one way is another, could be another total disaster. Our retailers have been very hard hit from the lockdown, and we're predicting maybe 20 or 30% won't be there. So George Street is going to be a ghost town. So the last thing we need is this crazy idea to proceed of a one-way system that will create total chaos with the traffic and basically all the disruption. And we are worried for the mental health side of our retailers too, with the dust and scenarios there. So what we recommend there is to take it back to a two-way but put it off for 2 years. And that would give us some time to get our retailers back, hopefully a wee bit of profitability. But George Street could be a total ghost town, and the one-way system would just make it worse. I'm thinking Cromwell Mall sort of stuff. So these are the realities of life, and our retailers are at a point where a lot of them are almost insolvent. So we need that put into the plan. What else we got here? The proposal in the long-term plan for 2021-23, in terms of the long-term plan, we scored a number of priorities, particularly around public transport and climate resilience. However, we're concerned with the council's intention to look at rating differentials as part of the LTP. We do not support rates differentials as the rating tool due to lack of transparency of funding. Rates differentials are collected up as different rates and added to an overall pool of money, making it near impossible for business to pay the rating differential to track the total charges as spent. So in conclusion there, this economic downturn uncertainty is particularly important that Dunedin City Council adjusts its annual plan of 2020-2021 in the rapidly changing environment of the impact of COVID-19. This is particularly important that it helps soften the impact on COVID-19 on the ratepayers, and that's also the commercial ratepayers, which are going to be fewer and farther. There's going to be less of them, obviously, in the next couple of years. We also need the disruptive policies like the one-way system to stop. So basically, that's our wrap. Got any questions?
Undoubtedly, thank you. A couple of questions from me to begin. When you say you don't support, and acknowledging that this discussion is focused around our annual plan and not our next long-term plan, but when you say you don't support a review of the differential system, but also that you don't think there should be one, you acknowledge that it would require a review to get us to a point where we changed it in your favour.
Yes, well, it's hard to know where all the money's going, isn't it? And I suppose if we're not for targeted rates too, so maybe it's finding somewhere in between.
But it would require a review for you to be able to make that point.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and then, I know it is on the long-term plan. This is an annual plan presentation. Yeah.
And secondly, just on your advocacy for asset sales, whether it be a forestry company or the Waipori Fund, you may not be aware that we don't have the capacity to unilaterally make those decisions. They're listed in our schedule of significant assets and would require a separate public process to even discuss that with our community. So that isn't an option available to us as we deliberate on the annual plan.
No, sure, but I suppose we've come into these very, very troubled times. You're going to have to look at all the cards that are on the deck, and stripping back the council is obviously got to be one of them. It doesn't make much sense to have the Waipori Fund when you're basically borrowing for it, and obviously its results will be pretty disappointing after the last financial crisis, which only happened 3 weeks ago.
Not borrowing for it, as far as I'm aware. Questions from councillors. Councillor Lord.
Yeah, thanks, David, for your submission. I just wanted to ask you a question. You talked about retailers really hurting at the moment, and a lot of them are basically insolvent. Now, I've heard this a lot prior to the COVID-19. Are you thinking, is this just a new status, or is this something that's ongoing?
Well, obviously there's been major disruption, but the figures we're seeing out of the retail sector are pretty obviously horrendous because they've been shut down. So what we need to get these guys back on their feet. And obviously there's going to be a lot of holes on George Street. And the last thing is we need is a construction team going through. I know you're going to do 3 waters, but they're going to need a bit of a breather on this. And obviously the one-way system will be probably the nail in the coffin, I'd say.
The next question I just wanted to ask, following up from that, but in view of, I mean, like, just even us meeting like this, there's an adaptation to new technology and people sitting at home buying on the internet. Do you think the day of the retailer on George Street is done? Is that something that, you know, like we're trying to save that, but do you think that will always be?
No, I don't think it's done, and I think it comes back to the landlord too. We've got to produce retail space that they want. So they might not want a long shop, so you're going to have to do the shorter shop. So there's got to be adaptation there. We agree that the George Street needs to be done up and make it a centre that people want to go to. But you're still going to have movement. It's still going to be vibrant, and you're still going to be able to access it. But no, the retailers will reinvent in a certain way. But I think people always want to go to a social shopping scenario.
Okay, thanks.
And also those restaurants, you know, that people want to go out.
Yep, thank you.
Councillor Raddick. On mute.
Yep, no, getting the cursor in the right spot. David, thanks very much for your submission. I have one particular question regarding tax deductibility of seismic strengthening. At the moment, seismic strengthening, Dunedin has a very large number of older buildings that, part of our plan is to have inner city dwellings. And if we were currently, seismic strengthening is a capital expense. So if the Dunedin City Council was to lobby central government and successfully get that changed into repairs and maintenance, it would become then a deductible expense. What impact do you think that would have on the Dunedin inner city housing stock?
Well, the housing stock's not really affected by it. It's more the commercial buildings, isn't it?
Well, there's older commercial buildings, some of which are underutilised currently and some of which are lying empty.
Oh, yeah,
So
sorry.
by making it a deductible expense, the idea is that the concept being that landlords or owners of those buildings that are doing nothing with them would be far more inclined to do them up for inner city dwellings.
Yeah, it would certainly help. They're all expensive. They're all expensive to do. We're just looking at one on the new 3G plan, and that's difficult to do. So the planning is not easy to get them through. Maybe that's something obviously not in this form to discuss. Anything that would help would be of great service. The problem is these projects are very, very expensive to do. Like a meterage rate, they're probably up $3,500 a metre. So realistically, you need to be pretty well funded to do them.
Yes, my point being that if you could make it deductible, that would
Yeah, exactly.
Would help.
And I must say the government has put back depreciation, so that helps a wee bit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Worship. Kia ora, Dave. Thank you for your submission. Currently, the council are doing a survey amongst Dunedin businesses to gain ideas for how we could help revitalise businesses post-COVID. I wonder if you've got any ideas, apart from reducing rates, as to what council could do to try and bring businesses and people back to the central city.
No, we could have Pearl Jam in the Octagon. No, I think what we've got to do, and you've actually got a group of it, the Dream Brokerage, is to keep some of these fringes alive too. But we don't want a whole lot of for lease signs right through the main street. So basically putting a slate into them and trying just to dress it up a wee bit. We're still got to. And it's going to be hard because we're in the middle of winter, obviously. But we've got to stop. We've got to keep Dunedin not looking too drab over this. It's probably a 2 to 3 year period. So we can all put contributions in that, and the council have got that urban dream brokerage, which is a great concept. So they basically put small installations in, and that's worked well. But it's good. You don't want 300 for lease signs on the main street. That's what we don't want.
Thank you. And just in passing, can I acknowledge the work that you have done and Oakwood have done in supporting that project over the years, David? It's been incredibly helpful. Councillor Benson Pope.
Thank you, Your Worship. David, your concern about the configuration of George Street as most recently proposed is obvious and noted. But you also made a comment towards the end of your submission that you acknowledge the need to do up George Street. So am I correct in assuming your objection is not to the expenditure of the $28 million on the surface once we replace the infrastructure, but your concern is about the actual traffic layout subsequently? Is that fair?
Yeah, probably fair. Well, you're obviously going to have to do the three waters, isn't it?
Yep.
And like it's doing it in a way that, yeah, you've obviously seen Auckland how that affected the train services that's been up there. It's how much disruption on top of what we've got now. Maybe it would just, these retailers will never come back, especially the small restaurant retailer. But no, yeah, you're right. It's on traffic movement, and basically, the brighter the main street, the better. But we just don't believe that a one-way system is going to deliver that. And like an example, like say you take a sports depot, you're in the Octagon, to get to take a sports depot and that one-way system is going to be pretty difficult to get to. So
yeah, just for clarity. So you don't object to the $28 million spend. It's just how the roading is configured as the issue. That's a fair statement?
Yeah, fair statement.
That's cool. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Vandervis.
Thank you very much. You suggested an equity partner for Aurora. Why have you suggested an equity partner as opposed to, for instance, sale of Central Otago Aurora, where I believe there are two companies interested in buying?
Yeah, that was the case, obviously.
A good chunk of it.
Yeah, obviously that was the case. That'd be a great result. I thought, sell the total as is. The problem is, I think we're getting up to about $1 billion in debt. It's starting to get, once we get $1 billion in local debt, it's starting to get up, isn't it?
Yes, but my question was, why do you suggest an equity partner rather than actually selling the major chunk of Aurora off, which is a Central Otago?
Oh, yeah. Well, I just don't think there'll be anyone else to buy Aurora at its present state. So it's probably got to go through that transformation. But if you could sell off Central Otago, why not?
Okay, and did you have any particular equity partner in mind? Do you think there is an equity partner out there that might be interested in partnering with Aurora?
Well, the government's saying, they want them structural assets to go in. Maybe there's a pathway there. I suppose when you looked at Vector in Auckland, they did float. I know it was a company that was working very well, but there must be international companies that are looking for infrastructural assets.
Okay, so you don't have anyone in particular, but you can see that there is some value to some organisations potentially there.
Yeah, there must be an Intertool, someone out there, surely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Marsh. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, team. Good luck. Cheers.
Mr. Southworth is next. We have was scheduled for 12:40. Welcome, Bill.
Councillor Houlihan was trying to get your attention.
No, I'm aware of that. As I pointed out at the beginning of the day and the beginning of the day yesterday, time is limited from a scheduling point of view. And
I actually put my hand up before I even started talking, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Southworth, welcome. You're on mute, Bill.
Can you hear me okay?
We sure can now. The next 5 minutes are all yours.
Okay, well, I'd like to begin by saying that you've had a brief from us, a two-page brief, and amongst the things that we were requesting on it was a $1 purchase of the Sims building from the council. David Bainbridge has since pointed out very kindly that in fact the council is not allowed to sell that site. So we wish to amend what we're requesting by saying what we're seeking now is a long-term lease from the council of the site at a peppercorn rental. I hope you've had time to read our submission. We've kept it reasonably brief because we know that you're very busy, but there's just a few things I'd like to highlight from it. First of all, your council survey of Port Chalmers people and others discovered that 70% of people who responded to that survey want that site used for some community purpose. And also I'd like to point out that what we propose to turn it into a very swish industrial site and a community multi-purpose site, that in Australia, we located a survey that had been done, and there were something like 34% of all people in Victoria, Australia, had, as tourists, gone to an industrial, gone to a heritage site. So we think that that's a very good argument, particularly given the recession that we all know we're entering into, and the need to build up again our attractiveness as a city for tourists. We see this as another piece to make Dunedin even more attractive for those who come here to have a look at past history. The second thing is that we just wish to remind you that an option was given by the council to replace the roof on this building, and it was never actioned. And thirdly, that you did have a contractor working on that site whose contract specified they would remove all asbestos from the site. In fact, that hasn't been done, and we would respectively suggest that you get hold of that contractor and get them to finish what they contracted to do. Now, the assistance that we're seeking is firstly, as I've mentioned, permission to lease this site from the council. Secondly, replacement of the roof. Thirdly, for the remaining asbestos to be mitigated. And we'd like some basic earthquake strengthening, and we'd like to see the Sims building registered under the district plan as a heritage building. Now, we've got an estimate for this work, and it comes to 450. And we want to emphasize that this trust would not seek any further special assistance. We want to stand on our own 2 feet. We've got a very energetic and keen bunch of people out here who want to turn that building into an attraction that would marry in with the existing Port Chalmers Heritage Museum and make Dunedin a site where people come to look at heritage things. So that's basically what we're on about. We think at this time that although you're obviously worried about expenditure and you have many people asking for expenditure, we think now's the time to actually put some money into the economy and into tourism to get it back on its feet. And this is part of that that plan. So that's all I wanted to say, and I'm available if any councillors have any questions on this.
Thank you. You happy to take questions now, Bill?
Yeah, sure.
Perfect. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, hi, Bill. Thanks for the submission, and thanks to you and the group for your continued advocacy over this issue. I have 3 very brief questions for you. First one is, I presume that you have been consulting and will continue to consult with the West Harbour Community Board?
Yes, we will. And in fact, the West Harbour Community Board is right behind what we're trying to do. It supports us to the hilt.
Okay, great. That's good to hear. Second question is, I know it was mentioned in the report, but can you reassure me, stroke the council, that if this does go ahead, that it will not in any way impinge and or compete with the current Port Chalmers Maritime Museum?
No, we see what we propose as a synergy with the existing Maritime Museum. If you're familiar with that museum, you'll know that it concentrates on ships coming and going and the history of ships and so on. This is an industrial museum, if you like. We don't like the term museum, but we want to turn it into a living, an exciting place to be that shows the great history of shipbuilding in Port Chalmers. Now, this is something different to what the existing museum does. And look, I'm a member of that museum. We would definitely consult with it, and we want to match into whatever they're doing.
Okay, thanks for that. And final question is a question I'd ask anybody who comes to council to ask for large amounts of money. Can you, I mean, what assurances can you give us that if we did fund anything, that you wouldn't just come back with cap in hand again?
Look, we don't want to spend our time spending other people's, but we do need a kickoff here at the beginning, and that's why we've emphasised in our submission that this is it. This is the one special request that we'll ever make. Of course, in the future, we may apply to your heritage funding just along with everybody else. But this is the one time to get a decent kickoff. And frankly, we want to stand on our own 2 feet, and we're a keen bunch, and we're going to work and raise money and get this thing up and running.
Thanks, Bill.
Councillor Vandervis.
Thank you, Bill. You've said that we should be putting money into getting tourism back on its feet. Do you accept that international tourism is simply not going to exist in any great degree for the next year, and that local tourism is going to be very constrained because of massively increased unemployment?
I agree with that entirely, Lee. And the point about this is a long-term project. This is going to take some years to get fully up and running, but we need to start now. And I agree with you. There's going to be and has been absolute carnage so far as tourism is concerned. But those of you who have studied economics will know that recessions are a time to start spending money, not a time to go in for austerity. And we think that if we start to really build up an even stronger base in Dunedin for tourism, and this is part of that scene, it's a very sensible way to spend public funds.
Thank you.
Thank you. There appear to be no further questions, Bill. So thank you for your submission and for your time this afternoon. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I even put my trousers on.
Never gets tired. It's 1:45. Our next submitter isn't due until 22:02. So I'll move that we adjourn the meeting until 1:40, seconded by everybody, including Councillor Gary. All those in favour? Those against? That's agreed. Thank you. See you all in nearly an hour.
Yay.